But just as against the perfection of poverty, so also against the good of continence, certain perverted senses have spoken, some of whom endeavor to exclude the good of continence by these and similar reasons. For the union of man and woman is directed to the good of the species, but the good of the species is more divine than the good of the individual. He sins more, therefore, who abstains altogether from an act by which the species is preserved, than he would sin if he abstained from an act by which the individual is preserved, such as eating and drinking and the like. Still, by divine ordination are given to man members suitable for generation, and also an inciting, concupiscible force, and other things of this kind directed to this end. It seems then that he is acting contrary to the divine ordinance, which abstains entirely from the act of generation. Again, if it is good for one to hold, it is better for many to hold, but best for all. But it follows from this that the human race fails. Therefore it is not good that any man should contain at all. Further, chastity, like other virtues, consists in half. He therefore acts contrary to virtue, who wholly pursues lusts, and is intemperate. Thus he acts contrary to virtue, who abstains entirely from lusts, and is insensible. In addition, it is not possible for some romantic desires to arise in man, since they are natural. But to resist lusts altogether, and to have as it were a continual battle, gives a greater restlessness to the mind than if one were to use lusts in moderation. Since therefore restlessness of the mind is most opposed to the perfection of virtue, it seems to be opposed to the perfection of virtue that one should maintain perpetual continence. These things then seem to be opposed to perpetual continence. To these may also be added the commandment of the Lord, which is read to have been given to the first parents, Genesis 1:28 and 9. 1. Grow and multiply, and fill the earth. This was not recalled, but rather seems to have been confirmed by the Lord in the Gospel, Matthew 19:6, where it is said, "What God has joined, let not man separate," speaking of the union of marriage. But those who observe perpetual continence expressly do the opposite of this precept. It seems, then, that it is unlawful to maintain perpetual continence. But this is not difficult to solve according to what has been said. For it must be considered that there is one reason to be held in those things which pertain to the necessity of each man, and another in those which pertain to the necessity of the multitude. For in those things which pertain to the needs of each man, provision must be made for each one. But of this kind are food and drink, and other things which pertain to the maintenance of an individual. Hence it is necessary that everyone should use food and drink. But in those things which are necessary to the multitude, it is not necessary that they should be attributed to any one of the multitude, nor is it even possible. For it is evident that there are many things necessary to a multitude of men, such as food, drink, clothing, houses, and the like, which it is impossible for them to be procured by one. And therefore there must be different offices for different people, just as different parts of the body are directed to different actions. Since then generation is not from the necessity of the individual, but from the necessity of the whole species, it is not necessary that all men occupy themselves with acts of generation, but some, abstaining from these acts, will be engaged in other duties, such as in the military or contemplation. From this, the solution to the second is clear. For by divine providence, those things are given to man which are necessary to the whole species. Yet it is not necessary that every man should make use of any of them. For man has been given the energy to build, the courage to fight, Yet it is not necessary that all should be builders or soldiers. In the same way, although man is divinely provided with the generative power and those things which are directed to his act, yet it is not necessary that everyone should aim at the act of generation. Hence also the solution to the third is clear. For from those things which are necessary for the multitude, although as regards individuals it is better to abstain, devoted to the better things, yet it is not good that all abstain, just as it appears in the order of the universe. For although a spiritual substance is better than a corporeal one, the universe in which there were only spiritual substances would not be better, but more imperfect. And although the eye is better than the foot in the body of an animal, yet the animal would not be perfect unless it had both an eye and a foot. Even so, the multitude of the human race would not have a perfect state unless there were some intent on the acts of generation, and some abstaining from them, and empty of contemplation. Now the fourth objection, that virtue must be in the midst, is resolved by what has already been said above about poverty. For the mean of virtue is not always taken according to the quantity of the thing which is ordered by reason, but according to the rule of reason, which attains the due end and is measured by suitable circumstances. And so to abstain from all pleasures of love except reason is called the vice of insensibility. But if it is done according to reason, it is a virtue which exceeds the common mode of man. For it causes men to be in a kind of participation in the divine similitude, whence virginity is said to be related to angels. To the fifth answer, the anxiety and preoccupation which those who use marriage have in acquiring wives, children, and the necessaries of life is continuous. Now the restlessness which a man suffers from the battle of lusts is for a certain hour, which is also lessened by the fact that someone does not consent to it. For the more someone uses things that are pleasurable, the more the appetite for pleasure grows in him. Desires are also weakened by abstinence and other bodily exercises which suit those who aim at continence. Even the use of corporal pleasures rather diverts the mind from its height and hinders it from contemplating spiritual things than the restlessness which results from resisting the lusts of these pleasures. The mind is attached to the carnal when pleasure causes the appetite to rest in a pleasant thing, and therefore, for those who are intent on the contemplation of the divine and of any truth whatsoever, it is most harmful to be indulged in romances and most beneficial to abstain from them. But nothing prevents it, although it is universally said that it is better for one person to keep continence than to use marriage, without it being better for another. Hence also the Lord, mentioning the facts about continence, says, "Not all understand this word, but he who can understand, let him understand." To that which was placed last concerning the precept given to the first parents, the answer is clear from what has been said, for that precept regards the natural inclination which exists in men to preserve their species by the act of generation, which however is not necessary to be carried out by all, but by some, as has been said. But just as it is not expedient for anyone to abstain from marriage, so also it is not expedient at all times when the multiplication of the race is necessary, either because of the paucity of men, as in the beginning when the human race began to multiply, or because of the paucity of the faithful people, when it was necessary to multiply them by carnal generation, as was the case in the Old Testament. And therefore the advice to observe perpetual continence was reserved for the times of the New Testament, when the faithful people multiplied through spiritual generation.